When talking about the greatest Souls games, you'll often hear Bloodborne or Elden Ring. Some would say Sekiro or Dark Souls 3, perhaps even Dark Souls 1. But few would go on and name Dark Souls 2. A lot of people consider Dark Souls 2 to be a conglomerate of badly executed ideas, and while that does hold some truth, it is important to note that many of these systems were not actually bad. Some of them were actually quite good. But despite that, it is undeniable that a lot of them were in need of some kind of changes and tweaks. Welcome! In this video, I'm going to talk about the better systems and features of Dark Souls 2. Those that will make their way into future From Software titles, such as Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and Dark Souls 2 too. Sorry, I meant to say Elden Ring. When talking about the better features of Dark Souls 2, power sensing is by far the best one in many people's minds. Simply put, what it does is that it allows you to attack with both weapons you're holding at once, giving you a unique moveset as you trade defense for offense. After Dark Souls 1, this felt like a breath of fresh air, as it allowed you to pursue a more aggressive approach towards combat. This lived on in the sequel in the form of paired weapons. A paired weapon is a piece of gear that takes up one slot in your weapon tab. However, two-handing it puts a separate one in each hand, this being quite reminiscent of power stancing. Interestingly enough, some of the most beloved weapons in this game also happen to be paired weapons, such as the iconic Farum Greatsword and Sellsword Twin Blades. I think it's safe to believe that the positive reception of this system is what caused it to make a full-on return in Elden Ring. Healing items in Dark Souls 1 were a luxury. You started with 5 Estus, and you could get up to 20, if you kindled bonfires. There was an issue with this though. You had to rest at kindled bonfires in order to get more than the starting amount, which meant that you had to kindle multiple bonfires. That is, of course, unless you were okay with going back to whichever bonfire was kindled. Anyway, to kindle, you had to spend a resource called Humanity. Twice, actually. First, to revert hollowing, and then to actually kindle. You could do this again until you reach the maximum of 20. In Dark Souls 2, on the other hand, Estus shards were introduced, a resource meant to increase the number of Estus you are carrying. Going forward, this ended up becoming the norm.
Pretty, be careful. I don't want to see my work squandered.
Forgive me, but now's not a time for libations. Goodbye.
Dark Souls 2 also popularized the idea of having multiple healing items. Dark Souls 1 was quite limiting in this regard, while Dark Souls 2, oh boy. However, there was one undeniable drawback. You could stack up on an unlimited number of healing items, meaning you could trivialize a lot of encounters. Why bother learning a fight when you can just out-heal their damage? I think that Sekiro did this the best. where you did have numerous options to recover your health, although they were in limited number. Do you guys remember illusory walls? Now, imagine if some of them were locked behind a consumable item. Those were the Pharaoh's lock stones. You used the lock stones to open the Pharaoh's doors. You didn't get many lock stones, although you could farm them. Even if the process was a bit tedious. Either way, these could lead you to some cool pathways and items. You could get all kinds of things, such as rings, weapons, even crafting materials. But usually they were rather pointless. And sometimes they could be a detriment as well, as you're about to see. These return in Elden Ring in the form of stone sword keys. They are quite identical. Except that these will always be beneficial to you. Sometimes they could open up a new area as well. They were also more readily available. You could get up to 80, while only needing about 50 per playthrough. All in all, the system was very forgiving. You know what's not forgiving though? You will often see people talking about an easy mode for Souls games. But what if I told you Dark Souls 2 offers the opposite of that? By joining the Covenant of Champions, you can turn on hard mode, making enemies hit harder and giving them more health. Does it remind you of something? Sekiro offers 2 layers of hard mode in the form of the Bell Demon and Kuro's Charm. The Bell Demon simply grants a stat boost to all enemies. Meanwhile, Kuro's Charm actively weakens you, making you take chip damage from blocking. I'm genuinely surprised that Elden Ring doesn't have a hard mode yet, although I'm sure we will see that in the DLC. The Souls-like genre thrives on the bosses you encounter and fight. The best, and sometimes even worst moments of these games are connected to bosses.
No! What the fuck?
By defeating them, you acquire their souls, an item you can turn into a weapon that's related to said boss. In Dark Souls 1, this was a tedious process where you had to upgrade a weapon and then meld it together with the soul, thus creating the item. Pretty cool process, but it felt like a chore. From Dark Souls 2 onwards, you simply exchange the soul item for your weapon of choice. This made the process a lot quicker and better, in many people's eyes, including mine, frankly speaking. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I do plan on making more Souls content. So if you want to stick around, then make sure to subscribe if you wish. Thank you once again, and see you next time.